Hey, Kevin. It's great to see you here. We've been chit-chatting and talking about the differences between Business Central and Dynamics F&O off and on for a long, long time, right? And having come back from a number of conferences lately and engaging with customers that are especially on that Dynamics GP to what's next move, right? Do they have to go to Business Central? The answer is no, right? But the conversation always says, well, what's this F&O thing, right? And how is it different? Is it something I should consider? If you're going to have to make a move from Great Plains, then obviously evaluating your options, given your growth, your size, your complexity, your needs is super important. So um, I walked away with a whole bunch of questions from these recent events, and I wanted to record those with you and ask those questions of you because
Great.
you've got a pretty nice background and real deep understanding of so many elements on the F&O side as my counterpart on that side of our Greylock team. And just want to see if I could gain some understanding. So you up for that?
Yeah, I am. And you know what? Afterward, I will throw a couple questions your way about the BC side, and we can draw a nice contrast here.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a fair trade to me. So, first question for you. Don't you need to be like of substantial size, meaning hundreds of users, in order to to really work inside or use F&O to its full potential?
So that's an interesting question because F&O definitely is an enterprise level ERP if it needs to be. But we have customers that go into the hundreds of users. We have customers that are all the way down into the tens of users that are smaller shops having a more integrated and automated set of processes around F&O. The nice thing about F&O is that there's kind of an a la carte selection of modules. And once you set up your base, your GL, your accounting fundamentals, what modules you choose to go with are up to you, and that really scales up or down the size of the product and the size of the amount of users that have to be involved with the daily use of the product at your business.
Okay. So it sounds like you can get by with a smaller number of users because there's a lot
Yeah.
of GP folks out there that do have 50, 100, 200 users. So F&O could be a viable option. It sounds like
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
user count. Okay, even for some smaller type of organizations.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the
All right.
minimum user count is 20 licenses. That's what you're going to buy. I mean, you could
Okay.
have fewer users, but you're going to pay for 20 no matter what. And I've seen on average, typically not as low as 20, but I'd say around the smallest I'll see is 35 to 40. And a typical implementation, somewhere in that 85 to 150. That's a pretty big range, but I would say that's kind of standard. And then, of course, you can go way above that with huge multi legal entity enterprise level businesses.
What types of users are those when you start to talk about that? Is it a lot of manufacturing specific people, or is it more accountants and payables clerks? And like, what's the distribution of the user makeup in an organization typically in F&O?
So really going to depend a lot by business, but manufacturing is a big piece of F&O, certainly. So there are manufacturing environments, there are distribution environments that exclude manufacturing. There's accounting pretty much everywhere you go. There's going to be some APAR managers of GL, things like that. Businesses are always, paying people and collecting money, so they're the fundamentals. But these other modules, your advanced warehouse, if you have that, maybe you'll have users on mobile devices. And manufacturing, maybe you'll have people operating a shop floor at all times. There's lots of variety of what can be in there. But you don't necessarily have to, after your accounting fundamentals, like I said, have everything in there. So certain environments, will be a manufacturing heavy setup. Others will just be a warehouse that's buying things, importing maybe from China, something like that, and sending them out the door, and they won't even touch production control.
Okay, so if I'm a distribution company and I'm looking for my after Great Plains solution, it does sound like if I'm of substantial size and I'm a manufacturing or distribution, I would probably, be a candidate for looking at F&O. All right, next question for you. I know that the size, the complexity of these two systems is just so different, right?
Hmm.
One of the things that, I've been asked is, doesn't it take an army of consultants really to get Dynamics F&O implemented and trained for end users and up and running and go live? I've seen them take long, long time, but those are for bigger organizations. But break it down for us. Tell us what it really
Sure.
is like, in terms of a consultant workforce to do
Yeah.
this.
So just like how many users might be in your system when it is live, I'll answer kind of in a similar way. It can take an army of consultants, but it doesn't necessarily take an army of consultants to get F&O in place. There's not a uniform right size for consulting help, and it really depends on the scale of your operation, how many users, and how many of those modules your company is going to engage with. So to turn this into a little bit more of a concrete example, what I'm thinking here is, let's say you are a distributor and a manufacturer. You are multi-legal entity. You have several integrations, and you are going to use the advanced warehouse. You're going to have mobile device users. You maybe have some transportation management. I just threw out a bunch of modules there. That's going to create that bigger picture. And F&O still is probably going to be a great fit for you, but it's going to take a little more to get it over the line. Now, depending on how your implementation goes, maybe you throw an army of consultants at it and you do it in 12 to 14 months and you get it done in one shot. Maybe you have a team of 5 consultants, something around that size, and you do it multi-phased. Maybe you roll out your core manufacturing processes first, you do your advanced warehouse after. There's many ways to approach an implementation, and being really regimented about it is important. More important, I'd say, than number of consultants is having a game plan and following through to the letter on that game plan will drive success. But certainly, a way to implement is to bring in a big team internally and consulting wise
Hmm.
and knock it out all in one big shot. I've definitely been part of implementations like that and seen success there.
Okay. So it does sound like you can have scale in your
Mhm.
implementation. What about phasing an implementation? Can you
Sure,
start with just some core financials, GL,
sure.
maybe some bank rec type of things, and then bring on phased warehousing or phased
Yes,
projects or some of the or more complex things? Is that ever a type of project that you
absolutely.
see? Okay.
And it really depends on what you're working with. We've seen some customers, especially if they're being supported already by, let's pick on manufacturing, a third-party manufacturing tool. Maybe they bring up core financials and keep operating in that third-party manufacturing, third-party warehousing tool, and have some kind of integration for phase one.
Hmm.
And phase two might involve bringing in bombs, routes, all those things into F&O, bringing up production. Phase three might look like bringing in the advanced warehouse so we have the mobile devices, or maybe a shop floor control. I actually have a customer now that's live on manufacturing, and we're engaging with them on an effort to bring in shop floor control now so that users will be clocking in and out of terminals and will be able to gather exact times in the production process. But that is happening in a live environment with a customer who is already using F&O now. Want to make a note about the smaller end too.
Okay.
I talked about how you can scale, you can phase for smaller customers. Sometimes all you need is that 2 or 3 consultants, and you might be able to get it done in a year if you are just intending to use that smaller selection. I recently put a project live that was core financials and distribution without that advanced warehouse, without the mobile devices or anything like that, and a little Shopify integration that their team actually knocked
Mhm.
out. We were able to get them done in 10 months. So there's a real range to this, and it was a one phase, one and done project. You can see a short, small team project. You can see a huge multi phase or a huge throw an army at it. It's really, truly dependent on what kind of project your team envisions and how you want to get to the finish line.
Okay. Very helpful. And we're in the neighborhood. Okay. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
migrate from, let's say, Great Plains to, Business Central is my experience.
Hmm.
And typically, depending on your level of complexity, that is measured in months. But oftentimes I hear an implementation of complexity, of course,
Hmm.
for F&O can take more than it or more than one, sometimes 2 years.
Yeah,
And I know you mentioned 10 months, if you can knock out something small, but shed some reality, if you would,
sure.
on what a real timeline might look like for an F&O project.
If we are looking at a average, if I had to throw a post in the sand, I would say on average 12 to 14 months is going to be your project timeline, just based
Okay.
on historical data. I'm not sitting at your business today, but that's something that you can look to and go, all right, about 12 to 14 months, maybe a little faster, maybe a bit longer. Now, these big enterprise multi-phase rollouts, that can go out the window. You might get your first set of legal entities live in that time frame, but if you've got more legal entities, more processes, that's when those projects go on and you hear about those 2, 3, 4 year projects. It's because we
Hmm.
are potentially rolling out the same set of processes entity by entity, or we've gotten all of our entities live with a core set of functionalities, and now we need to bring modules into each of those legal entities. So there are many ways a project can get longer, and it certainly can, like you mentioned, get out in that 2, 3, 4 year range, as well as that shorter end, like 10 months. And how we discover what your project length is going to be truly is when we get in and we do some business process analysis. We start
Hmm.
doing a gap fit, we start building our requirements list. That's going to paint a picture. So it's a little bit of pre sales and a little bit of the upfront beginning phase of our project that we're going to really map out that timeline.
Okay.